So let's start from the top. I was born March 15th, 1991 in Staten Island, New York at the Richmond Hospital on South Shore. I think, was it South Shore? No, North Shore. I was born on North Shore, right off of Castleton. I lived in Park Hill. My mom and dad lived in Park Hill for a season, and then they lived in West Brighton on Barker Street until I was 3 years old. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina because my dad was on the run for murder. Now, I tell people this story, but I don't tell y'all this part. My dad actually didn't do it. My dad took the rap for his friend because there's a code in the hood, you don't snitch. So actually his friend did it. But my dad wouldn't snitch on his friend, and they were trying to pin it on him. So they wanted my dad to do some time, and my dad was not with it. So my dad packed us up and moved. No. Actually, my dad was still locked up and about to get out on bail. So while he was still locked up, my mom had actually packed us up and moved us to Laurinburg, North Carolina. And when my dad got out on bail, he didn't move to Laurinburg with my mother, okay? Now, the thing is, my mother had moved to Laurinburg because she had already had family there. And if y'all know anything about North Carolina, Laurinburg is a very country town. So they went from living in the city to living in the just straight country. I'm talking about catfishing with strings, okay? Country. And so we was living there for a while. Then my dad moved down. And my dad ended up getting a construction job and stuff like that. And then somehow, some way, I guess he got arrested for something. I guess out with his friends, got arrested. And then they had pulled up his warrant for arrest in New York. So they made my dad sit in jail for, I think, 30 days. And they were waiting for New York to come and get him. But New York never came to get him. So North Carolina had to release my dad. So my dad is basically, because of that, he couldn't get arrested twice for the same thing. Y'all know that's illegal. So basically, North Carolina said that if my dad got caught in any other state, he was on his own. But now, because he was released in New York, didn't come get him, he was safe to stay in New York. And he wouldn't have to do time. So that's what happened. My dad ended up getting released, and so he ended up staying in North Carolina. So I think at some point they ended up moving to Charlotte. Okay. When we moved to Charlotte, I don't know, I think I was 5. My mom and dad, like, it seemed, for the most part, my household seemed peaceful. When my mom and dad were together, you know, there was a structure there. My dad is an alpha male. Okay. Now I'm gonna tell y'all something else. My dad, straight alpha male. I'm talking about, he don't believe women should be boisterous. He don't believe women should be manly and loud. And he always believed women have a proper place and they should stay in their place. So my dad always taught me and my sisters, you know, how to act like ladies. You know what I'm saying? And to just carry ourselves with class. And I'll be honest with you, my mom, when she was with my dad, she upheld that standard. You know what I'm saying? And even though my dad lived a legal lifestyle, he never brought it home. There was never, there was just a distinction. He never brought his friends home. He never brought his partying, his hanging out home. He kept it in the streets. But if my dad would ever have a man over for company, he would be like, yo, go put some clothes on. And I mean, this is up until the day he died. Like, if he felt like my shirt was too revealing, he would say to me, yo, what's wrong with your shirt? Like, why are you dressed like that? My dad, until I was a grown adult, okay? Well, I remember when the belly shirts was popular, I wore a belly shirt. And then one time my dad pulled me to the side and he said, why you feel the need to wear a shirt with your stomach out? Like, why? What's the point? And he was like, yo, you need to go put some clothes on. So my dad was old school. My dad was not with that. All that body showing and breasts out. No. Now I knew how he would allow me to dress trendy and nice, but showing my skin and doing all of that type of stuff, my dad was just not with that. He was not with that. He just wasn't with it. So even though my dad was like a gangster, he was from the old school. You know what I'm saying? So there was just certain standards he upheld, So when my mom and dad broke up, things changed. I believe my mom maintained the structure that my dad had set because, okay, let me break it down like this. My dad grew up in a 2-parent home. His mother and father were married until the day they died. And my grandfather never remarried. Every single child in the household had the same last name, Beatty. They were known as the Beatty family. And even though they lived in the projects, my grandmother was a strong woman of God. And anyone, if you mention Mama Beatty in West Brighton, her name ring bells like 12 o'clock. The older generation would say, wow, she was such a woman of God. She would correct women in the community. She would, if people needed help, they would come knocking on my dad's mother's door. My dad's mom was a woman of God, and it was not a question. You knew it. I remember a story where my cousin Malachi was like, he remembered being a kid playing in the living room, and my grandmother used to play the piano. She had a piano in the living room, and she had really long fingers, mind you, I never met her. She died when I was 3. So I never really got to know her. So she, my cousin Malachi was like, oh, she was, in the living room, and people would come over to pray with my grandmother. So then my grandmother would have people come over. She would do prayer cloths, give them cloths, things like that. And my grandmother, like one time this blind guy came to my grandmother's house and he wanted prayer for his eyes. And then my cousin was like, one day he heard her saying, Miss Maggie, because her name was Margaret, Maggie, I can see. So my grandmother would really pray for people's healing, and the Lord heard her prayers. So she was no joke. On the other hand, my grandpa, he was a drunkard. He suffered from drinking, and he also was not a Christian. He was a Mason. So there was this cut in the household. As my dad got older, he took more after his dad rather than his mother, but he never forgot the standard that his mother brought to the table. You understand what I'm saying? So when my mom and dad were together, because he brought that standard, especially when it came to a woman to the table, she maintained it. Now, when my mother and my dad broke up, the household literally changed overnight. Different men in and out of the household, girlfriends over, partying, drinking, hanging out. And the thing is, I was born a daddy's girl. My mother told me that even when I was a child, when I would be in my father's arms, I would just rest and just be cuddled up with him. But even when I was in her arms, I would be fiddling and shaking and you know what I mean? So I was naturally a daddy's girl. So you can imagine when my mom and my dad broke up and now all of these different men are entering the household, I'm like, who are these men? Why Why are they here? You know what I'm saying? And I was, even as a kid, I was not the type to hold my feelings back. You know what I'm saying? If I felt some type of way, I would mention it. So I started to become distant. Now, in this time, my mom and dad started to get into a bad. I think when they broke up, my mom expected them to get back together. And that didn't happen. My dad ended up getting a new boo. It did not sit well with my mother. So my mom used to take my daddy through it, child. I mean, call the police on him. She would go bust windows out his car. She had got people to break into his house and rob him. And every time my dad moved somewhere new, my mom would literally move into the neighborhood. It's crazy once you think about it, because as a kid, I didn't understand what was going on. But now that I'm older and I look back, I'm like, dang, that's crazy. So it was like my mother just, because she was, I guess because of the way things played out, she wasn't happy. So she used to take my dad through it. I'm not even gonna front. So with all of that, you know, mind you, my parents were never married. They never got married. You know, it became challenging because it's like sometimes my dad was around, but then when things would get crazy with him and my mom, he wasn't around. But then sometimes he was around, you know. So fast forward, you know, I'm living with my mother, and I guess at that time she started to indulge back into cocaine and stuff like that. And as we got into our, I think around what, 6 or 7, I don't know, my mom started to become abusive. So like she would do stuff like in the middle of the night she'd come home, and I guess she was high, and if the house was dirty, she would just flip out and wake all of us up and make us clean the house all night. And then she would beat us while she making us clean the house. I remember one time she ended up hitting me in the head with a broomstick, and the skin on my head was split with a wooden broomstick, and she cracked my head open. My brother was caught playing with like a lighter, and so my mother put his knuckles on a gas oven and burnt his knuckles, and I'll never forget, he had bulbing blisters on his knuckles because she had burnt his knuckles. And I just, like, 1 minute, like, it was so confusing because 1 minute my mother would be loving and nice, but then 1 minute my mom was just a monster. And so, and it was such a, and it was like rolling a dice with my mom. Like, you didn't know what you were going to get from her. Like, she would just be, it was so confusing, you guys. I realize now I was raised with someone. My mother was, I believe, demonically possessed. I don't believe she was diagnosed bipolar. I don't believe that a bipolar diagnosis is just, oh, you have a split personality. I don't believe that. I believe, or, you know, you just have mood swings. I believe that it's a demon. I believe that a spirit is abiding there. And whenever that spirit wants to come out, that's when, and especially with drugs, the drugs bring out that spirit. But when you, let me tell you something, when you do drugs, you open up an illegal gateway into a spiritual realm. So something's coming back with you. That's why drugs is just so crazy. So yeah, like they're growing up, especially in that time when they just broke up and she realized they weren't getting back together. She would just, and my mom would, she would rag my dad. She would sit and talk in front of us. And she would talk about how he ain't SHIT, he ain't this, he ain't that. And even as a kid, I just had this mouth. Y'all, I had a mouth since I was a kid, a mouth. And I would be like, Ma, I don't like when you talk about my dad. And the thing is, like, my mom would even sit and talk trash about my dad in front of his own family members. And his own family wouldn't put her in check. I would be a kid being like, Ma, I don't like that. So I had a lot of busted lips growing up. My mother would just punch me in my mouth and my lip would be split. Or this right here, I don't know if you see. Right here. That's because my lip was split. My mom would just like, boom, punch his lip split. So I grew up with a lot of busted lips. My mom would just hit, backhand me in the mouth. My whole lip would be busted this hard, be red. She'd just hit us, hit us like in the street. Like my mom would hit us like we were people in the street. That's how she would hit us. And so one day, when I was 7 years old, now mind you, I didn't know who Jesus was. I was not raised Christian, okay? I had a dream, and I was in my same neighborhood where I was living, and I remember that apartment because in that apartment, we suffered the most abuse from my mother, mentally, and just mentally, physically, and emotionally, we suffered the most abuse. And it just like, sometimes I would be like, where is daddy at? But then at the same time, now that I'm older, I realize like, yeah, he could have been there, but the fight. And I don't know. I don't think my dad was strong enough to fight the type of fight he would have to fight with my mom. Like, y'all don't even understand. My mom is a trip. Y'all don't understand. Like, even now as I'm older, I realize why my dad stayed away, because it was so much war. Like, it would be to the point where he would have to kill her. Like, she would cross boundaries like that to where you be ready to kill her. You know what I'm saying? So just stay away for, you know what I mean? My mom never made it easy on my dad to be around. But then because he wasn't around, she would really just tear him a new one. And because he wasn't there to defend himself, you know, a lot of my siblings fell for the bait and they turned on my dad. But again, I told you I was a daddy's girl from the womb. So I was just not, I loved my dad, and there's nothing no one could say to change my mind about that. To this day, there's nothing no one could ever say to me. So when I was 7 years old, I ended up sleeping. I was sleeping in my bed, and in my bed I had a vision. I got out of my bed, and then I walked into my neighborhood, and I never forget, the sky was like an indigo blue. Either the sun was setting or the sun was rising. And as I started to walk deeper, like out of my neighborhood into the main street, I started to see like demons all over. They were everywhere, you guys. It was just demons everywhere. And I had just found out who Jesus was. I just learned his name. And so as I'm watching all of these demons around, they start to close in on me, kind of like a zombie movie. They just start to circle in and close in on me or whatever. And I remember calling out, Jesus, help me. And again, I'm 7 years old. I just learned his name, but something birthed in me, something birthed out of me that had me call his name. And I'll never forget, a sword came out of the sky into my hand. And the sword was so long that it went all the way up to heaven. And I never seen the top of the sword, but it was that long. And I took that sword. I don't even know how, it's so long. And I destroyed those demons. And when I woke up, I told my mom about the dream. And I never forgot that dream. I told my mom about the dream. And then I told my aunt, who was a Jehovah's Witness. I'm like, because I figured maybe I could get some answers from her. And she said, oh, well, that's the Bible. I'm like, the Bible? So what are you talking about? What I'm going to do, snack devils with the Bible? So she didn't really give me a clear understanding. So I just I tucked it away in my heart. But still, life went on, you know. Fast forward, I think around elementary school, around 4th grade, my mother had actually gotten in trouble with the law, and so she couldn't keep us. And so my dad had to take us. And so this actually was, my mom had no choice but to peacefully give us to my dad, because my mom couldn't keep us. So those years of my life were some of the best years I ever had. To this day, I might even get emotional. Like, as a kid, those were some of the best years of my life I ever had as a kid with my dad. You know, he was strict. Like, he wouldn't let us go outside to stay when the street light was on. And, you know, we always were in the house. He always took care of us and he kept us. But those were some of the best times in my childhood I remembered, because he just took care of us. You know what I mean? We always had a decent house. He always kept the house clean. He didn't let friends come in and out of the house. I was at my best place. And I miss my mom. I did. Even though she was so abusive, I still loved her and I missed her. But I'm not gonna front. My best years was living with my dad. He moved us out of like the rough area we were living in. He put us in a nice neighborhood. We went to a nice school. You know what I mean? We had bikes. We had Christmas. You know, he would take us on trips to New York. And it was some of the best times. You know what I'm saying? But then once my mom got herself together, she had ended up taking us back. And just like that, went right downhill. And living with my dad, I realized that there was a difference between structure. You know what I'm saying? When we were with my dad, we were structured. There was just structure. There was structure. But when we live with my mom, even with her being married, it just wasn't it. So my mom actually, mind you, my dad wasn't a Christian. He wasn't a Christian, so he didn't take us to church or nothing like that. But he really just gave us what we needed as kids. once my mom took us back, you know, we would go to church. Her husband was, she ended up getting married to this guy. And I think she told me she married him because he had money. So she married him. He was fat, big fat guy named Stacy Stevens. But my mom was like, you know, he loves me and he's willing to accept me and my 5 kids. So she married him. So we would go to church and everything like that. But it was all fake. It was all religion. My mother would go to church with her husband. They'd be stomping and doing all that Pentecostal hooping and hollering. But then as soon as we got home, it's like she wasn't as abusive because she couldn't do those things in front of Stacy. But just still the verbal and mental abuse was still there. And I ain't gonna front, my older brother had it the hardest with my mom. Had it the hardest with her. She was just so, oh God, she knew how to play him like a fiddle because he loved her. You know, he had that son's love for his mother. But my mom, one minute she loved him, one minute she cared for him, the next minute she calling the cops on him. She's the one telling him to do wrong, but then when he get in trouble, throw him under the bus. Like, and Stacy just, sometimes he was there to correct it, but most of the time he was just sniffing up my mom's butt. I ain't gonna front. And so what had happened was, my mom and dad had this love and hate relationship. Come to find out, my mom still had feelings for my dad. So Stacy found out. And so Stacy broke up with my mother. And he felt betrayed. So my mom went back single, living with my mother. And again, just as a teenager, just was no structure in the household. Like, you know, whether we went to school and did what we were supposed to do or not really didn't matter to my mother. She was more so focused on herself, you know what I mean? And what I realized now is that no matter what my mom did, and my mom did some crazy things, the Lord kept a household. We always had a place to stay. Always had a place to stay. Always had food. Even with all the crazy stuff going on, like the Lord kept us. You know what I mean? And my mom would try to live in the most cheapest neighborhood, you know, so we ended up growing up in rough areas, you know, and my mom would get some welfare assistance, but for the most part, my mom worked. My mom worked. So one thing I always knew about my mother is that she works. You know what I mean? She'll still get some stuff from the system, but she's not going to totally depend on the system. She would still work, you know what I mean? Because my mom wanted to do what she wanted to do, and she wanted money to do it. So I definitely took that quality from my mother and my father, because my dad's work ethic is also impeccable. Until the day he died, he worked. So that's what I knew. I went to high school. I lived right on the east side in Charlotte. Went to Independence High School. Just lived, you know, a rough lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? I had sex at an early age. I was having sex at 14. I ended up getting pregnant at 15. And actually, my dad made me get an abortion. And he basically was like, you know, you're not going to be a loser. You're not going to keep that baby. And you're not going to be a loser. So, again, my dad was not a Christian. So he made me get an abortion. And so the crazy part is, once I got that abortion, I'll never forget, the night before I got the abortion, my dad said, these men out here ain't S-H-I-T. And I would know, because I ain't S-H-I-T. And they don't want nothing from you but sex. And he said, and I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed of myself, because I just seen the disappointment in my dad's face. And so he gave me money, gave it to his girlfriend, and one of his girlfriends. My dad never had one girlfriend. My dad always had multiple girlfriends, even if they didn't know it. He never just had one girlfriend. He always had a couple. So whichever one he picked for the day to take me, she took me to get my abortion. And that opened up a gateway for me. First and foremost, I was humiliated because I believed everything that my dad said about the guy I was pregnant about was true. And it was true. And at the same time, killing my own baby opened up a portal of just, I don't know, I feel like a spirit came into me, but it was different. It was different. It's like a spirit of Jezebel entered. And I took everything that he had said to heart that day, but there was a new spirit upon me to where I believed, yeah, men only want one thing. And so from that moment on, I just was like, well, since that's all they want, I'm going to get what I want. And the thing is, now look at the parallel. I had the training from my dad on how to be a lady, right? And yet I was still not saved, still in sin. And now I had this concept of men not wanting anything from you but sex, right? So unlike these feminists today, I was like the real Jezebel. These girls today have a Jezebel spirit, but they're also psychotic. I mean, they're walking around shaving their heads, not shaving their underarms, crazy, right? I hate men. On the contrary, I love men. Men were my hustle. Men were so easy to manipulate and to get in anything I wanted. You know what I mean? So I had no problem using a man to benefit myself. And I had learned so I'll tell you what I did. I was promiscuous, but in a different way. The men that I wanted to use, like the men with I would always end up meeting men that had a reputation and they would have money and they would, kind of would be Mr. Show Off, Mr. Alpha Male. I would never sleep with them because once you slept with them, you gave them basically the power. So what I would do is I would have guys that I didn't sleep with that I would kind of string along to get what I wanted from them, money, stuff like that. But on the side, I would have that one guy, so two guys, like three different dudes that I dealt with that maybe I slept with here or there. And they would be the dweebs. They would be like the police officer on the side that's a geek, or like the little nerd over here that nobody knows. So I will always make sure I dealt with guys from two different playing fields so they would never cross paths. It would be impossible for them to cross paths. And again, it was my way of manipulating. So, I never sleep with the guy that everybody knows and has the money and clearly only wants the butt. But I would get the guy who's like the officer who actually likes me and wants me to be his girlfriend. But, 1 minute we together, we kicking it, everything's cool. Next minute I'm gone. I'm chilling with someone else. And I would never say to them, I'm your girlfriend. We just friends. We just having a good time. That's it. So I took upon a spirit of playing. Like I played the game and I played it well. And I mean, it's so crazy because like even now, all of my exes still contact me back to this day. All of my exes. I was married before I had a husband. I'm gonna tell y'all that story. Y'all gonna trip at this. Even him, and he'd be like, "Oh, I really loved you," and they always like, "I really loved you," but when I hear that, I'd be like, "You really love me?" Wow. Because in my mind, I didn't love any of them. I absolutely didn't love them. I just wanted from them. You know what I mean? So I used them to get what I wanted. And it was just, playing, manipulating, playing. So actually, before I had moved to New York, I think after I got out of high school, I got my GED. I ended up meeting my ex-husband, Fernando. He was white and Spanish. I met him at 18. And we got married, just as a piece, quick little marriage or whatever. And I was with Fernando for a little while, not long. And the thing is, Fernando was a year older than me. So Fernando was mad, young-minded. And I actually was faithful to him, actually. And so things kind of got distorted in our marriage because he just was not a man. He just I ended up being the breadwinner in the relationship. I mean, it got to the point where I would come home and be fussing with him about the house being clean and dinner cooked for me when I get home. And then one day I just sat down and I said, oh my God, am I the woman in this relationship or am I the dude? So I was just like, I can't do this. I feel like I'm the man in my own household. I don't want to be a man in my household. So I was like, Fernando, I don't want to be with you anymore. I'm good. So I was like, listen, you keep the apartment, figure out how you're going to pay for it, but I don't want to be with you. So this is what happened. I leave to go to my mother's house. And I'm like, I'll stay with my mama and I'll figure out, get my own place. And I was like, I'll be back like the next day to get my things. And I'm going to tell you right now, I had literally prayed. I would be praying to God, like, God, could Fernando please cheat on me so I could leave him? Because I felt like that was the only way I could leave this man is if he cheat on me. And I knew, you know what I'm saying? Again, from going to church back in those days with my mom and her husband, I at least knew, you know, you can't just divorce your husband for anything. You know what I mean? Because divorce till this day in my family is frowned upon. And so I was like, man, at least if he cheat on me, I can leave him, right? So I would literally be praying like, please, Lord, let him cheat on me. Not to say that God allowed him to cheat on me. He was in sin. But I wanted him to cheat on me so I could leave him. I didn't want him. I was good. So one day, now mind you, I moved out and I told him I'm going to be back the next day to get my stuff. But then after that, you on your own. I don't want you. I ended up coming to the house, and I'm trying to use my key to open the door. The key's not working. So then I'm knocking on the door, and I'm like, nobody's answering the door. I'm like, what's going on? So then it was a townhouse. So it had the front door right here, but then the patio was right next to it. It was like a typical Southern townhouse apartment. So I end up hopping over the little fence, and I look through the patio doors. And I see a girl waking up off the floor. And something just clicked in me. I remember leaning back, and with literally both of my feet, I kicked the door. The whole door came off the hinges. And when the door landed, I landed with the door. And I seen a girl. And I ran after her. And I grabbed her, and I was starting to beat her. I was beating the living daylights out of her. So then she runs upstairs into the bathroom, locks herself in the bathroom. Okay? So then I go into the kitchen, and I get a knife. And I take the knife, and I think it was about this long, and I stab Fernando. He had a Jesus tattoo right here. I stabbed him and then pulled it. And then he's like, ah, you stabbed me! You stabbed me! And I'm like, yeah, that's what you get. And so after I stabbed him, I hear sirens coming. So I'm like, oh, I got to get out of here. The police are coming. So y'all, I'm trying to tell y'all I'm saved. Y'all keep thinking it's a joke. I'm telling y'all I'm really saved. I'm telling y'all, I'm going to tell y'all, this is my testimony. I'm going to tell y'all some things. Y'all not get buckle your seatbelts. Get ready. So the crazy part is this. As the police come, I'm so distraught in my mind. I don't even go out the front door. I go out the same way I came. I leave out the same way I knock down the door, hop over the gate, get in the car, and leave. Okay? So then, I think 2 days later, I'm egging his calls. He's constantly calling me. And then I find out he tells the police what happened, and I got a warrant for my arrest. And so now I'm like, yo, I'm really done with you. You gonna have the police. You gonna tell the police it was me, and you gonna put a warrant out for my arrest. You gonna get police involved. And I think my disdain was from the fact that, you know, my mom would do that to my dad. So the fact that he did that, I'm like, now I'm done with you. Now you're really done, right? So then he's still calling me. He's like, Bev, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wish I never did that. Please, I want to work it out. I'm sorry. So I'm like, all right. I finesse him into going to court and dropping the charge. And then after that, I broke up with him. And he went back he lives in Memphis now. He went back where he was from to Memphis. But I had to like act like things was cool with us so I could get him to drop the charges. But then from there, I ended up moving to New York. I had moved in with my dad, and I had signed up to go to college. And at that time I was dating. I ended up meeting a guy from like a West Indian dude, and was dating him for a while. And still I was going to college and working at the same time. I got pregnant by him, so I got an abortion because I didn't want to, I didn't want the baby to mess up what I was doing. You know what I'm saying? Not that I couldn't afford the baby, not that I couldn't take care of the baby, but I just knew. And I'm going to tell you how I found out I was pregnant. My dad had this big king size bed. So one day he's laying on the side of the bed watching TV, and I come and I lay next to him, and I just fall asleep. And so then my dad wakes me up, And he looks at me, he says, "You're pregnant." And I say, "Well, what are you talking about? How you know?" He said, "I could feel it. You pregnant." And so then I went to the doctor, found out I was pregnant, and I got an abortion. But I found out because my dad told me. My dad knew. So fast forward, I go to school in the city. I end up moving to Brooklyn, and I get an apartment right in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And it's right before it turned into Bedford Heights. I lived there. And while I was, and you know, I ended up breaking up with the West Indian guy that I was dealing with after I got the abortion. I dumped him. And, you know, I just was in college. And so now I'm in college. I was like going to school and then dealing with my boyfriend. But then after I dumped him, now I'm fully in it. I wouldn't go party or nothing because I had a boyfriend. But now I'm single. I'm in college. I'm chilling. I'm getting invited to parties. It's smoking weed. It's lit. Everything's going on. So I'm like, boom. It's party time. So now I'm going, you know, to clubs. It's a lot of dorm parties going on. Actually, to be honest with you, because it was school, because everybody knew everybody in school, I didn't sleep with anybody at school. I always, like, again, I never dealt with, if I'm going to, like, I would never date a guy at work. I would never end up in a relationship with a guy I work with. Never. Like, that's too close to home. Like, I keep my, whatever I'm dealing with on the side in the cut. But if I'm at school and stuff, I'm just not gonna do that. So, you know, school, typical college parties. We would go to a lot of fashion shows because it was a fashion marketing merchandising school. There was a lot of gay dudes in the school, a lot of gay women. So that was my crew I hung with all the time. I used to hang out with Rihanna's hairstylist. I would go party with her. I dated a rapper. I ain't gonna mention his name. And I was just out. I was doing my life. I was living me, partying, chilling. And then my friend, who was a gay dude, he was my roommate in the dorms. When I moved into my apartment in Brooklyn, he became my roommate in Brooklyn. So we was, again, still living together, partying, chilling, this, that, and the other. And so I was not doing my work at school. I was getting in trouble constantly because I'm coming late to classes, things like that. And so they end up kicking me out of school. They expel me. Not because, you know, nothing crazy, but because my grades was just not up to par. So they just was like, "Listen, girl, you ain't taking it seriously. Kick me out of school." And I was like, "Man, fine, because I don't really want to be here no way." So, and at that time, I was doing me. I was smoking weed. I was selling weed on the side. I was hanging out with my friends. So I'm just like, I'm living my life, whatever. And so I end up, what happened? I end up, dang, I'll tell you guys this crazy thing. So I end up, I think that's when I started doing like scamming, and I was doing like money laundering, and like, I ended up doing like this big money laundering scheme where I got like 25 grand cash. And I actually, the first time I did it, I didn't get caught. The second time, I think I got arrested, but they let me out. But I ended up at some point turning myself in, and we didn't even go to trial, nothing. I ended up just copping to like 5 years probation, right? And so what happened was, after I had copped, they tried to rearrest me for another crime that I didn't do. I think they tried to arrest me twice for the same crime. And so then I ended up sitting in jail for 7 days because I was waiting on my dad to bail me out. So while I'm sitting in jail, now mind you, before I got arrested, mind you, the detectives came to get me, but they didn't realize that they had already arrested me for the same thing. So I just ended up being back again for the same thing. Now, mind you, I was already over it being locked up the first time because I sat on Rikers Island, and I'm going to tell y'all something. I'm not a Rikers Island type of chick. It's crackheads laying on the floor. People is just crazy yelling. I just was like, listen, I'm a white collar criminal. I am not with crackheads and all of that. You know what I'm saying? This is not my steez. So I'm like, oh no, baby, I can't come back here. This ain't for me. You know what I mean? It's all fun and dandy when you just making money, you going out to eat with your friends, you partying, champagne and all of that, until now you sit in the cell next to a whole crackhead that's on the floor screaming, and y'all in the same place. Things get real. So I was like, listen, I can't do that no more. So I'm thinking in my mind, I just got to be more smarter about my crimes, right? Come to find, then middle of the morning, I get picked up. And the police come. Actually, the police tried to come get me. I'm going to tell you what happened. Actually, this what happened. I had met, after I got out of that jail the first time, I met a guy who was a correctional officer who worked at the jail. And at this time, he was really interested. Actually, he just texted me the other day checking in on me. He was, you know, he was really interested in me and connecting and things like that. And so I think while I was dating him, they ended up picking me up again for the same thing. And so then now I'm sitting in Rikers Island waiting on my dad to bail me out. And so the correctional officer helped my dad pay for my bail out. Mind you, he works at the jail I'm locked up at on a different side because he worked with the men. But he's like giving my dad money, helping my dad get the money up so I could get out of jail. So, while I'm in jail, I think a couple of days before 2 weeks before I got locked up, I remember coming home drunk. I was at the bar drinking with my friends. We chilling. And I don't know. I came home and I went in, and my roommate was in his room. I went to the bathroom and I just turned the water on and I just cried. And I just started crying out to the Lord because I was so empty. And the reason why was because I felt like I had executed everything that the world would say is supposed to make you valuable. I'm talking about I got the fur coats. I got the designer shoes. I got the designer bags. I'm good looking. I can get any man I want. But I'm miserable. I'm so miserable. And I think prior to this time, I had just had my third abortion. I dated another guy, got pregnant. Didn't want that kid as well. So I just got a third abortion. And at that point, after my first abortion, my second and third, I was numb to. It was like an errand. It's just something to get rid of. So I felt like I had did everything that what I thought would make me acceptable to the world, but yet nothing was working. It was useless. And with all the men I had, I never trusted any of them, and I never loved any of them. Because again, I only felt like they wanted one thing. So I guess that night coming home, reality set in, and I allowed it to be reality to me, and I just cried. I just turned on the water and I cried to the Lord because I was so empty. I was so depressed and I was so low. And I was the type, I would never show my emotions. I was never transparent. I just put a smile on. My life good, boo. And I was stuck up too. Just to be, nose up. I'm cuter than you. Your man want me. And this was my attitude. This is what I presented to the world. But inside, I was miserable. So that's why when I see females that used to be like me, I see through them like glass. Because I already lived that. Been there, done that. So as I'm crying, I'm just crying to the Lord. I'm saying, God, help me. Help me. And I think 2 weeks later, they come and pick me up for the same crime. So then when they come and pick me up, while I'm in jail waiting on my dad to bail me out, and, you know, my correctional officer boo thing on the side is collecting money to get me out, I meet a woman, and she tells me about that night that where I had cried out to the Lord, and I was just depressed. I cry out to her. I'm crying out. And she told me about that night. And I knew that this woman was prophetic and she was speaking from the Lord, because no other person would have known about that night. No other person. So she ends up telling me, like, you need to surrender your life to the Lord. And she said, if you don't, you know, you've experienced everything, but if you don't turn your life to the Lord, death is all that will come upon you. I was headed towards destruction. It's basically what she was telling me. I was headed towards death. I don't know if it was a spiritual death. I don't know if it was a literal physical death, but I knew what she was saying was true, and I knew it was from God. So finally, I get bailed out of jail, and she even told me the day I would get out and everything. When I got out of jail, child, you couldn't get me to steal a pack of bubble gum. Honey, before then, I would have dropped $100 on the street. That's mine. You on your own, boo. I'm doing me. Selfish. I was so selfish. I was such a selfish person. I was just selfish. Oh, I was so selfish. When I think back about how selfish I was, I just cringe. Like, oh, Bevelyn, you were just so ruthless and selfish. You know what I mean? And so, and mind you, in this time and all the things that I had been through with my dad, when I getting out of jail, my dad rode with me all the way to the end. So when I was released, he was standing outside waiting on me with a coat. He was there for me. And I mean, he just stepped up as a father, you know, should. And that blessed me too. I believe the Lord used him to just bless me, to show me how much he's with me and not against me. And so when I got out of jail, I said to the Lord, I remember going home and I prayed and I said, Father, I don't really know how to do right. I've been doing wrong all my life, but I always knew when I was doing wrong. I never didn't know that this was wrong. I just shut my conscience up and did what I wanted to do. So I said, Lord, I don't know how to do right, but I know when I'm doing wrong, and I'm going to make a decision right now to serve you. So, I stopped doing the scamming and I got a job. And now this was hard for me because even if back in the days, if I worked a job and my check said $400, that's $400 from that check. But Bevelyn is going to get money from somewhere else. Somehow, some way, Bevelyn is going to have money. Okay. But now I was living honestly. So I knew I had to stop scamming. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to work this job and whatever this check is, that's what it's going to have to be, I guess. And so I still, would kind of like fake manipulate men. I wouldn't sleep with them. Now, at this time, I didn't stop having sex just yet. I would only stick to one guy that I would sleep with, but I would still date guys behind his back and on the side. And I wouldn't ask no questions. And if about him, what he was doing, and when he would ask me questions, I would remind him, I don't ask you no questions. So don't ask me questions. Just relax. So I was still kind of low-key use men, you know, if I wanted. And at this time, I still was smoking weed. Even though I had accepted Jesus Christ, I was like, okay, Jesus, I accept you. I didn't totally surrender. I wasn't renewed of my mind. So, like, I would still smoke weed and things like that, you know what I mean? But now I met a guy who sold weed, and so I would have him give me like 8 grams of weed for $40 because he liked me. So I would have my one of my guys over here give me the money to get me some weed over there from this guy. So I still would juggle my men, but I just wouldn't be as, you know, wild as I was. So then, you know, I started going to church. I went to a gay church. The pastor was gay. But, you know, again, I had came from hanging out with a lot of gay people. So I felt like, you know, they're born that way. So, you know, God made them that way. What's the big deal? I can hang with some. So I'm going to go to a gay church, you know, and I liked it. I'm like, listen, they be getting down in here. It's fun. It's cool. There was absolutely nothing spiritual about the church. But I went to church anyway. I was like, okay, cool. So, and I also ended up getting a job working for a feminist organization. And so that was me. I was going to a gay church. I was working with a feminist organization. I believed that Jesus was God, but I also believed, you know, if Muslims serve in a different way, Muslims are Muslims, they're there, but it all leads to the same way. These are the things I thought. So I lived like that for a year, but I had stopped, like really living bad. You know what I'm saying? I'm still bad, but I wasn't as bad as I was before. Until one day I met my best friend now at May Siobhan. And I met her while I was canvassing for the feminist organization I was working for. And I met her right in front of Trump Towers in Columbus Circle. And I was pitching to her to donate to the organization. And then she was like, you know, we could, she had a little accent, you know, we could give the money and things like that. But, you know, unless they know Jesus, what does it matter? Right? And when she said that, I was like, you're right. So we ended up exchanging numbers. And then I think for 2 weeks I didn't contact Edme. And then one day the Lord reminded me of her, and I reminded. Now let me tell y'all, this is a trip. Until this day, I'm bad with numbers. When people give me business cards, I give them to Edme. I am bad at keeping cards. I'm bad at keeping contact with people. Everybody knows if you text me, expect for a response in 2 hours. I'm just bad in that area. You better off calling me. But like text messaging, email, and things like that, that is really not my strong suit. Mentally, I just don't got it. So Edme keeps the numbers and all of that. But for some reason, I kept Edme's number. You know it was the Lord. So in 2 weeks, the Lord reminded me to call her. So I called her, and she invited me to dinner. And I thought Edme was gay. Because I'm thinking, you know what I'm saying? Again, I'm coming from a time where it ain't nothing free in this world. Ain't nothing for nothing leads to nothing. So if a person wants to meet you for dinner, things like that, obviously it's an agenda. And you know, New York's not gay. So I'm like, yeah, she probably gay. Now, mind you, I ain't had no quarrel with that. I'm like, listen, if you gay, that's you. I just hope you, I supported the lifestyle and all of that. I just wasn't practicing that. I didn't go that far. I like men. Okay. So when we ended up going to church, going to dinner, and we just sat there, and Emma just listened to me talk, and she threw a couple of things in and ministered to me a little bit here or there, but more so just listen to me. And she ended up paying for dinner that night, which was so nice because I ain't have it like that. And so then I guess that Saturday she invited me to do praise and worship in Columbus Circle in public. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. And so from that day on, we would meet every Saturday and do praise and worship. Now then one day, I'm like, girl, I want to invite you to my church. So she gets dressed, she comes to my house, right? And before she had came, I had just finished smoking weed, right? So before I would go to church in the morning, I had my blunt, I'm smoking, I'm chilling, and I'm like, all right, I'm about to go to church. Boom, it's lit. So she come, and I didn't even realize it till later on down the line. She was like, I smell weed and everything. But Emma was just holding her pearls, just like, ugh. I'm like, listen, I got my gospel in my blunt. I'm ready for church. It's lit. So, so then Emma, she doesn't say anything. She holds it. She holds her composure. We end up going to church. And I tell her on the way, oh, we're going to a gay church. And so, again, she held her composure. But I didn't realize inside she was cringing. But she just, all right, Lord, we getting somewhere. All right. So we go to church. And the service is just a typical service with no spirit. Just everybody doing something. And after church, I'm like, so what you think? Did you like it? It was church, right? It was nice. And Emmy said something to me that was so profound that day. She said, Bevelyn, we are all born in sin. That's why we have to be born again. And when she said that, she didn't have to tell me twice. It made sense. And this is why it made sense. Because my roommate was gay, and he would say to me all the time, like, Bev, I want to give my parents grandkids and stuff like that, but I was born this way. Since I could remember, I was attracted to men. So I'm like, well, if God made him that way, what's the big deal? But when she said we all born in sin and we have to be born again, it answered that conversation I had years ago with LC. Oh, I just dropped his name. Sorry, y'all. And so it was like, it's true. And in time, Emma ministered to me. She prayed for me for the weed smoking because scripturally I didn't understand what was the big deal. I'm like, God made weed, what's the big deal? So I was still smoking weed for like a good 6 months after meeting her. And she was again discipling me, teaching me to learn the word of God and stuff like that. But when I was ready to, have my day started, I needed a little something get me right. And then I'm like, okay, it's gonna be a good day. I'm ready to go. And even though I felt like I wasn't that bad because I wasn't a heavy smoker, I wasn't a chimney smoker, but it was still wrong. So this is what happened. One day we go to Charlotte, North Carolina to do a little bit of ministry and a little bit of ministry, like just on the streets, talking to homeless people, things like that. Now, mind you, I'm still smoking weed, and to visit my family. And so one day, now what I would do is respectfully not smoke weed in front of Edme, because I just knew that's not what she liked. So I would just kind of keep it away from her, behind her back. So one day, her and my friend Jessica, they had flown out of Charlotte a day earlier back to New York. And my flight was the next day. So now that night, I'm hanging out with my family. And a typical family party for me is spades playing, people drinking, smoking weed, this, that, and the other. So I'm smoking weed, I'm chilling. And so then that morning, I smoke another blunt. And then I'm about to be on my way back to New York. So as I'm in, I have the rental car. I pull the rental car off at the rental place. And then this Spanish woman gets in the car that works for the rental place. She gets in the car. And she has to drive it to drop me off at the airport. So as she's dropping me off at the airport, there's a picture of Jesus. Y'all know my favorite picture that I have back there. I don't know if you could see it. She has the same picture I have of Jesus on my phone. She has it on her phone. So then I say to her, oh, that's a wonderful picture. I love Jesus too. And so then she says, yeah. This is my husband. I love him. Little English. And so as I'm sitting with her and she's talking about how much she loved Jesus, I just feel so convicted inside, because I know I just got finished smoking weed and I just felt like a phony, and I felt so convicted. So I told her, I said, listen, I have an issue with smoking weed and I want you to pray for me because I know it's wrong and I need help. So then she says, okay, I'm going to pray for you. And I say, okay. And I was so ashamed, and I was ready and willing for what was about to happen. She ended up praying for me in Spanish. So I never understood a word of anything she said, but I felt the power of the Spirit upon me. And the moment she prayed for me, from that day forward, I never smoked weed again. When I walked out of that car, I never touched weed again. I was totally delivered and didn't even want to. I didn't have to gradually stop smoking. From that day, after she prayed for me, I wanted the deliverance, and she had the Spirit of God to bring that deliverance to me. And at this time, I was not baptized in Holy Spirit. I didn't get baptized in Holy Spirit till about my second year. But she prayed over me, and I was delivered, totally delivered. So, and in time, the Lord showed me what was wrong with smoking weed. And actually, basically, the Bible says that even a drunkard will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. Weed is a direct form of intoxication. When you smoke weed, it is a direct form of intoxication and mind altering, okay? Even when you drink wine, it doesn't immediately intoxicate you or alter your wine. But if you start to drink too much, you will become drunk. You will become intoxicated, and it will alter your way of thinking. But when you smoke weed, it takes 2-3 puffs and you are intoxicated and your mind is altered. The Bible says that no drunkard, adulterer, homosexual, amongst other things, will inherit the kingdom of God. So when you smoke weed, it's a direct form of intoxication. Just like smoking crack is a direct form of intoxication. Smoking meth, any type of drug. And what it does is when your mind is altered by a outward substance, it opens up a gateway into the spiritual realm illegally, and spirits will come upon you. The only thing is, with alcohol, you have to drink a certain amount before you become drunk. And that's why he didn't say you can't drink wine. He said don't be a drunkard. So there has to be a form of self-control. But there is no self-control with weed. It is an immediate intoxication. So there's no, oh, you can be a Christian but still practice that. It's just biblically, it's not correct. What I will say is this, though. The Lord was patient with me, But he corrected me. And I could not get the baptism of Holy Spirit until I stopped smoking that drug. Okay? As well as practicing sin and things like that. And in that time, I fell back. There were times that, you know, in the first 2 years of her discipling me, I would know weed is not good for you. Weed is not good for anybody. But fine, you smoke it while you on this earth. But if you die and go to hell, it's not God's fault. It's yours, because you just been warned. So you do what you want to do, sweetie. You're gonna be the one to determine where your soul goes. I know mine is going to heaven. There's nothing absolutely okay about weed, because it alters your mind, and you can see that now with the young kids. They smoking weed like nobody's business, and these kids are getting stupider and stupider. And I thank God that I stopped smoking weed before I got to that age where my brain really was developing, because it really alters your brain, and it can do some permanent damage to your mind, bro. So nah, weed is not okay. And if you say you a Christian, now if you're not no Christian and you a pagan, do you? I mean, you in sin anyway. But if you say you're a Christian, smoking weed it don't add up. The Lord says if you love me, you'll obey me. And so the Lord was patient with me in my first 2 years of getting saved. I had to grow to a place where I surrendered and obeyed the Lord. But I'll tell you this. When me and Emma first met, she would minister to me, and we would go out and minister she would I basically watch her minister the gospel, and she would train me. But I wasn't renewed of my mind until day by day she started teaching me. And then I used to try to not read the Bible. I did not want to read the Bible. I was like, I don't need the Bible. Why am I reading the Bible? Like, I don't need to read it. Like, it's the same. Everybody knows what's going on in the Bible. Like, what do I need to read the Bible for? And Emma kept pressing to me, read the Bible. 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 And whoever says stop eating sugar and coffee, you sound stupid. Coffee does not alter your mind. It just gives you a little bit of caffeine and boosts you for the day. And sugar don't alter your mind. It just gives you a little sweet flavor. But if you eat too much of it, you'll get fat. But if you do too much of anything, it ain't good for you, sweetie. It's called self-control. Stop trying to use excuses because you sound stupid. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I think I want to read the Bible, whatever. Like, you know what I'm saying? Whatever. I'm doing me. So finally, and then they kept pressing me. No, you need to know the word of God. So then one day I just prayed. Because we would go out when we would talk to people. I'm so used to watching Edme do it. But now when it was time for me to minister, I didn't have nothing to give them. You know, I'll probably use worldly situations and stuff like that. But I didn't know the word. So then one day I felt stupid. I think I ended up saying something to somebody and I didn't know what to say. And scripturally, I wasn't equipped like I needed to be. So I felt dumb. I ended up feeling stupid. Now, if you want, when Bevelyn feels stupid, best believe I'll never feel stupid twice. I only need to feel stupid one time. Okay? Once. And I'm going to fix that real quick. So I think this person was talking to me about the word or something like that. And I didn't know how to answer it. And somehow, some way, I felt they said something and I felt stupid. So from that day forward, I prayed and I was like, Lord, please give me a hunger to read your word. So M.A. told me start with New Testament. So I started reading New Testament. And the thing is this, as I was reading New Testament, and as I'm going through the book and I'm listening to Jesus. Now, mind you, I felt the spirit of Jesus and I felt his love for me. Through what he brought me through, I realized like I intimately felt Jesus, but I didn't really know him like that. As I started reading his word and I'm reading the things coming out of his mouth, I'm like, yo, Jesus is one of the realest men that ever walked this earth. And you got to understand, my dad was an alpha male. So I'm attracted to alpha males and not those. My dad wasn't the loud and demanding type, but he was a man of structure. And when you around him, you're going to respect his set. It's just what it was. And it reminded me of Christ. When you around Jesus, you're going to respect his set. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just going to respect it. And he didn't back down. He kept it what it was is what it was. And he said it. He was a man. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like, yo. And then I'm reading some of the things he would say. I would literally be reading the Bible. And I'd be like, oh, like he said that? I'm like, oh. And so now I'm like, yo, this is the realest thing I've ever read in my life. And I don't know, it's like, as I read it, it was ready to burst out of me. It was ready to come out of me. And I don't know. I mean, I understood his love from a spiritual perspective, but now I understood his structure and his word. And so I just started growing in the Lord. And that's how I became the Bevelyn I am today. I started off head deep in sin. I had sex. I smoked weed. I hung with gay people. I was a Jezebel. I lived a life of total sin. You know what I'm saying? I didn't even tell you about that time I was in a hotel with a guy, and I ended up robbing him. We went to a hotel together. He wanted to sleep with me, and this again before I got saved. And so while he's in the shower, I take his wallet and his keys, and I leave him in the hotel. Y'all don't know, when I was in sin, I was in sin. I lived a life of sin, and it was what it was. Okay. But once I got saved and I learned the truth, I lived the truth. So, you know, that's my testimony. The Lord took a wretched girl like me, and he cleaned me up, and he cleaned me up nice. And for me, the same traps that I was stuck in, I see the world stuck in. And so that's why I go so hard the way I do. Yeah, even Cardi, because I know Cardi B has a similar testimony. The only difference is I'm not going to promote my sin to the world. I acknowledged that I was a loser. I humbled myself enough to acknowledge that I was a loser, and I thank God he caught me before the time. I would never want to be in a leadership position the way I am now, teaching people to sin, because now not only is my soul at jeopardy, but now I'm causing someone else's soul to be at jeopardy. So from someone like me who lived a life of sin, there's no excuse. If he could do it for me, he could do it for you. You know what I'm saying? There's no excuse. And there's nothing you can tell me. I was in the parties. I was in the clubs popping bottles. I was dressing half naked. I was doing all of that. I was, you know what I'm saying? Dealing with different men. I was doing that. I lived it. I did it. You know what I'm saying? And the Lord saved me. He turned me around and made me new. You know, he made an honest woman out of me. He made me a wife. He cleaned me up. You know what I mean? He took me from a wretched Jezebel sinner, and he cleaned me up. So if he could do it for me, he can do it for you. And that's why when people be like, oh, you're this, you're that. If only you knew. You don't know where I came from. When I came from what I came from, I was in it. You know what I'm saying? So for me, there's what can you accuse me of? I've already done it all. I've done it all. If I wanted to do it, I could do it. I don't want to do it. I was delivered from it. Why would I want to go back to my vomit? You know what I'm saying? You know, and that's just the reality. And I'll tell you what God gave me more than anything. More than the material things that I have, mind you, I always live nice. Once I got out on my own, whether it was through scamming or whether it was through this or that and the other, I always lived a decent, nice lifestyle, always dressed a certain type of way. What I will tell you this, though, I used to be a brand person. Like I used to be a label whore, and I had to wear labels. It had to have some type of brand. But as the Lord started to renew my mind, first of all, when I went to college, I realized that, let me tell you something. Everything be made in China, first and foremost, okay? Let's just say Walmart got a collar shirt under the brand Morona, because that's their brand. And they charge it at Walmart $18. Don't y'all know Calvin Klein will get a shirt, have the same factory making the same shirts with the same fabric, and he'll put his name Calvin Klein on it, and you guys will pay $60 for the exact same shirt that is at Morona Walmart. So when I went to school for fashion marketing and merchandising, and I learned that, I realized, wait a minute, we're paying for brands for nothing. I still like to dress nice, but I don't mind wearing a pair of $20 heels. I don't mind putting on a $20 bag. You know what I'm saying? Because that doesn't matter. But I do like to dress nice. The Lord didn't change that about me. I used to be more provocative before I got saved. But guess what? The Lord cleaned me up. He took the perversion out of me, but he didn't take my personality from me. You know what I'm saying? When I was in sin, I was bold and I was gangster for getting this money and playing these dudes and living my life. But now I'm bold for getting his kingdom, playing his devil, and living the Lord's life. He just switched up the motive. You know what I'm saying? And he also made me pure, you know. When I go outside, I don't think about, mind you, when I was in sin, I used to care what everybody thought of me. I was such a critic on myself because I wanted to fit in with everybody else. If they wearing fur coats, I need to wear a fur coat. If she got a Louis bag, I need that Louis bag. If lace wigs is in, I need the newest lace. Cause I was trying to keep up with everybody. I was trying to keep up with the Joneses. And for all of y'all who on the front say y'all don't be wanting to keep up with the Joneses, you lying. That's what I was. I used to want to keep up with the Joneses. Once I got saved, I don't care anymore. I set my own standard. And the standard that I set is through the word of God. You know, and that's why y'all meet somebody like me who's so raw as a Christian, because I found the truth. I found the truth. I was depressed inside. Even with all y'all, I used to be a cake face. I would never, back then, I would never get up on here on a video if my whole eyebrows ain't beat and I'm just looking like, I would never get on a video and be talking to y'all because I didn't feel sexy enough. And I also like to use my looks to lure in people. And that was also another spirit of Jezebel that the Lord delivered from me, to where now I'm just pure in him, natural in him. What you see is what you get. And I don't need to paint this or paint that for you to like me. I'm very naked and transparent before the Lord. So if what I give to the Lord, the Lord is my audience. So if you have a problem with it, take it up with my audience, the Lord, because I do what I do to please him, not y'all. At the same time, those who are after God's own heart, just like me, they're not going to come against what I stand for. They're going to touch and agree with me. And I didn't grow up religiously. When I found God, I found him for real, in spirit and in truth. And I acknowledged that I was a loser. And I realized I needed help. And I let him help me because nobody else could do what God could do for me. Nobody. And that's my testimony, y'all. So I'm going to get a massage and go shopping. But that's my story. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening. I pray this helps you guys understand my heart and where I come from and why I go hard the way I go hard. I'm only gave like my whole testimony would be a whole book. But I gave y'all at least an hour and I went over a bit of what I could give you. But that's Bev. God bless y'all. And until next time, I love all of you. Bye.